Hello, everyone out there. I'm Maureen Ballatori. I'm the founder and CEO of Agency 29, and I am delighted to be here for Visit NC Farms to talk today about how to leverage AI to market your farm. Just a little bit about me to give a little bit of my background as we jump in here. I'm trained as a designer, a marketer, and a strategist. I speak all over the US, primarily to agricultural audiences on how to have a smarter farm. Today, the basis of our discussion on smart farming, and I shouldn't use that term because we know in the industry that that means something else, but we're applying it to the basis of building a better business today. And we're talking about specifically leveraging AI to do that. My firm works exclusively with food, beverage, and agriculture brands, and we're brand builders. So, our whole big idea or our whole big picture, our goal is to help clients with their big picture. There's a lot that we've learned about leveraging and using AI tools, and am here to share some of our favorites with you today. At a very high level, what we're going to go through for the next hour is talking about an understanding of how to effectively use AI in your business and leverage it as a tool. And so I like to emphasize that because one of the areas where people tend to use AI in the wrong way is when they're using it as the solution exclusively, right? Where they're going to an AI tool and they are taking that output just as it is and they're not working it, right? So it's kind of like clay if you think of it that way. You would never just go into your backyard, dig up some clay and all right, I'm ready to build my sculpture. You would work it first, right? To be able to build what you're looking to create. You can think about AI really similarly in the idea that what you take out from the tool, from the AI tool, is something that you need to work. It's a collaborative relationship between you and the AI platform to get what you're looking to accomplish. We'll talk about some of the little tricks that I have learned along the way from just doing as well as from asking others of what are some of their favorite ways to use AI tools. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about marketing strategies for farms. And so the idea of as we think about applying these AI outputs and what we want to put in to get out what we want, what are some of the big ideas that we may be able to use when it comes to marketing strategies. A specific request that also came from Visit NC Farms is the idea of that you are all, well, some of you are looking to understand how to take the data from your POS system and your email newsletter and your loyalty programs and that sort of thing. And how do we actually use AI tools to leverage that kind of information? So we'll talk about that today as well. I would like to start with a little bit of a basis of understanding of how you may be using AI, even if you don't know it. Because I've given this talk before and stood in front of a room of a couple hundred people and said, all right, who's using AI? And, a majority of the room raised their hand. And I said, who's not using AI? And a couple people put their hands up. And the fact is that if you're using technology in any way, you're probably using AI because it's just built into so many tools these days. Google is a staple in my business and in a lot of the work that I do. I wanted to start with Gemini as Google's AI tool. And so there's a couple of different ways where this shows up, right? And so one is right in your Google email service platform where you've got some help me write solutions, or you have options to prompts that you could even use to write the whole email for you that again you should then edit. And in your Apple iPhone, it's something similar to that is happening with predictive text, where I was expecting this to say take me out to the ball game, but it predicted some different options, which also just proves my point about the idea of AI as a tool, and you have to kind of, take it with a grain of salt in terms of what comes out. Going back to Gemini for a minute, it it not only is working within many of the Google tools that you're already using, and so it can help you uh, evaluate spreadsheet content that you're putting into your Google Drive, and it can help you write emails and that sort of thing. But similar to how many of you are probably used to using Chat GPT, Gemini also works like this. So we can say hi to my friends at Visit NC Farms, and it works just like that back and forth chat tool. So common misunderstanding there that it is not just an undertone of technology in many of the things that Google touches. It is that, and it is a back and forth chat tool where you can prompt it for information, give it information for it to leverage, and then give you other information. Social media is another one that's where it's automatically built in. So social media platforms are a common way where people are already interacting with AI. It's interesting, like the Meta platform, so that's Facebook and Instagram, are using AI to determine when image content, and LinkedIn is doing this as well, when image content was created with AI and then it is flagged within that platform as AI content, which is just so interesting. But all social media platforms also run on AI powered algorithms. So it's the idea of, we're frequently telling clients that you have to post frequently in order to stay ahead of the algorithms to keep your audience engaged with the content that you're putting out there. So let me elaborate on that for a minute, just because we're also talking about leveraging AI and applying it to your farm and your business from that regard, is that you need to post frequently on, let's say, Instagram when you're in season in order to get the eyeballs on your content. And so what you might want to do is post more frequently, like you're probably not posting in the off season, or you're not posting as frequently in your off season. So what you might want to do is kind of a ramp up to your in season where you start posting more frequently leading up to your in season. And the reason for that is because the algorithm, the AI powered algorithms behind that run the social media platforms and choose what content gets shown to whom, is that the more frequently you're posting, the more the algorithm is going to understand, oh, this is a frequent poster, and we're going to want to show that content to their followers and to other people like their followers, because we know that this is a user who is going to be trusted to deliver content and engage their audience on this platform, which is what the platform wants, right? Instagram wants you to help keep people on Instagram. So when you think of it that way, with Reels content as well, that the short form video content, the reason for that is because the algorithm knows that the valuable content is what keeps people there longer. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm using Instagram as an example, but this is true for TikTok, for LinkedIn, for all across the board. The more frequently you post, the more the algorithm will help display your content because it knows that you can be trusted to deliver. We also see AI tools, Internet of Things happening in the home. So I have a Nest thermostat in my home that uses AI and predictive understanding to tell me when my house should be cold or not. I give it like a range, and it stays within that, but it also predicts my schedule based on what is a typical Monday through Friday and a Saturday, Sunday for us, to help the thermostat be more efficient, which is great, right? That I don't have to think about it, and setting the schedule up like that. Amazon is another one. So if anybody is shopping on Amazon, and you have recommendations that get served to you, those are also AI tools or AI algorithms that are helping to serve up that content. Now, let's talk about some of the different tools that you can use, because I think also one of the things that tends to happen is people are I know about Chat GPT and I use Chat GPT, which is fine. It's a good place to start. They continue to improve that tool. It's great, but I'm going to give you some other options as well. So let's start with ChatGPT. What is it? It's a large language model AI chatbot. So just as we were just looking at Gemini as well, that is also a large language model AI chatbot in certain scenarios. But ChatGPT uses natural language processing to have human-like conversations. It was developed by OpenAI. You'll see others as well that are leveraging OpenAI. So ChatGPT is intended to have human-like conversations. And so where I find this most interesting is you do not have to type the prompts, right? If there's one thing that I've learned about farmers, it's that they're sometimes looking for the simplest tech solution, right? Don't overcomplicate this for me. And so what I love about ChatGPT is if you install the app on your phone, there is an option to choose the microphone in there. So you can just literally have a conversation with the ChatGPT system and ask it questions, so you can say, how can I best create a loyalty program for my farm? And then have a back and forth conversation to get better outputs of that. Now, again, going back to this question of, how do North Carolina farms leverage the data that you currently have for your operation to be able to be smarter about it? I would not use Chat GPT in that discussion method for that purpose, but it may be a good idea partner. But if you're looking for a place to start, you can certainly start there. There just may be some other tools that get a little bit more advanced that would be better opportunities to leverage that information. But it's one of those things that it's kind of like riding a bike. I'm a big analogy fan, if you haven't noticed from the digging the clay in the backyard and riding a bike, as we're going to talk about here. But it's the idea of you have to start somewhere, right? So even if you're starting with ChatGPT and you're typing in the prompts or you're using the chat bot from your phone via the app, start using it. Understand what you like about it, what you don't like about it. What kind of questions can you ask to get a better understanding? What if you asked ChatGPT, what questions should I ask you to get a better result of X, right? That's the beautiful thing about all of this is that you can even ask the tool how the tool can help you get better outputs. That's the beautiful thing about all of this. I also heard someone mention recently the idea of the best way to think about AI tools is as a word processing partner, right? A computer processor partner. So it is not just a chat like we used to use chat rooms as like I used to use a chat room as a kid. It's so much more than that. It is as if you could speak to the computer directly and have it analyze information for you and understand more deeply. When you think of it that way, you may get more beneficial outputs from using the tool. Let's define large language model here. So large language model LLM is AI that uses deep learning techniques to understand and generate human-like text, and it's being trained on essentially all of the information that it can touch. So that usually means it's the internet, it's website content, it's blogs on websites, so on and so forth. If it's on the internet and it's something that the large language model can read, then it is using it to provide information to you as the person who's trying to get this information, right? And so that can be very straightforward in terms of this Q&A that we've been talking about, question answering. But it can also summarize text. It can help with creative writing and that sort of thing. I find it to be, and I'm picky, right? I own a creative agency, but I find it to be a bit lackluster when it comes to creative writing, but there are some ways around that as well. One of my favorite tricks in that regard, if you're looking for an AI tool to help you write social media captions, for example, one of the great things that you can do is let's say that there's a celebrity that has a tone that really resonates with your brand. Let's say Matthew McConaughey or George Clooney or something. You can ask the AI tool to write your content as if you were Matthew McConaughey. And so it just helps to kind of give the AI tool a little bit of a better understanding of how you want this to sound for your brand when you're posting that kind of content. And I like a celebrity too, because again, with this idea of a large language model, what's it doing? It's pulling, the idea of the interviews that George Clooney has done and how he speaks and what his values are and that sort of thing. So when we choose a celebrity as opposed to, Mayor John in my small town, it doesn't have a lot of information to pull about Mayor John in your small town, but it has a lot of data to be able to pull insights from when it comes to George Clooney or Matthew McConaughey. So use that celebrity voice when it comes to creative writing. I find it really helps to create better content in that way. So Dolly was also developed by OpenAI, and this is an AI platform that creates images from text description. So this is a tool that you can say, make me an image that looks like this or whatever. Um, it is now true that many of these AI tools, and this is true for Google Gemini, it's true for ChatGPT, that you can just type in the prompt for the image that you're looking for, and it will output it for you right in that chat like question and answer kind of thing, where you can say, make me an image like this. I've also used it to cartoonify my colleagues on my team so that we could have cartoon images for like a little social media post. Now, this is where you need to beware with Google Gemini, with Dolly, with ChatGPT. They are great as inspiration when it comes to images. They're great for, I kind of want my social media vibe to look like this. Um, I want to build out a new section of my farm store, and I want to use these tools to help me ideate what it looks like, right? Because then you can talk a little bit, right? Type a little bit about what you think you want that to look like. It can give you a result, and you can say what you want to change. I don't want this to be pink. I want it to be green, or, make it look more homesteady, like Joanna Gaines from Magnolia. You can have that sort of back and forth to get an image output of what you're looking for. Now, where I think you should be cautious is, just as we've been talking about, these are tools, they are not the direct output, especially when it comes to image creation, is that, remember, these large language model tools are pulling from reference all over the internet, which means that when something is created for your business as an output of this tool, it is borrowing inspiration from others. So especially if you said, I want this to look like Magnolia from, by Joanna Gaines, and like have that kind of vibe. The AI tool does not know that it needs to be legally different enough that it's not copied, right? That you're not going to be faced with a copyright infringement of some kind. So this is why I say use it as inspiration, use it as an idea of what you want to create, and then build them in a way that is not gonna, suscept you to um copyright infringement. I also have a tool a little bit later on. It is a separate paid tool. Many of these are free, at least for like initial prompts. I do have a tool later on that I'm going to talk about that promises that the images that it creates are not infringing on any copyright. And so that if you're generating images from that tool, I would say that you're okay to use them straight out of the platform. But let's talk a little bit more in a little bit. I'm going to make a note about this, about like AI images and another kind of concern about that too. We'll come back to that. Okay, so this is my absolute favorite. I am prompting Claude daily, like literally every day. I should pull it up and show you all my historic prompts. But so Claude, very similar to Chat GPT, it was developed by Anthropic, which is it's like another company. And what I love about Claude is that not only does it, I just like the way that it prompts, and all of these tools are constantly ideating. This is developing so fast and constantly changing. But what I love about Claude is that it gives you an option of how you want your response back. And so you can do normal, concise, explanatory, formal. You can add others in there as well. And so I just really like that you can prompt the tool to have a certain tone out of the bat, right? Like if I'm another way that I use Claude specifically, but really any of these AI tools will work. Let's say you're a farm and you're applying for a grant. You can copy paste the whole grant into the platform and say, "Hey, you don't have to say hey, it's a robot, but I like to be nice to the AI tools. You never know. So, hey, Claude, I would like to apply for this grant from this organization. I'm going to put all of the content here that is the information about the grant. Then I would like you to ask me questions about my farm so that you can help me structure a response to this grant that meets XYZ parameters. Let's say that you need to respond to a number of questions or whatever it is. And you can do that in multiple steps too. But one of my best recommendations is to say up front what you're going to do. So, hey, Claude, my bestie, hey, Claude, I'm going to give you the information about a grant that I would like to respond to. And then I'd like you to help me format my response, my submission for this grant. So then you dump all of that content in, and then it's going to respond because that's what it does, right? It's a question and answer, it's a prompt response tool. And so you then can ignore that response and say, now I would like you to ask me questions about my farm operation so that you can understand my business and then align it for the grant response, right? And so then it'll say, okay, here's 10 questions I'd like you to answer. And then you just answer them, not use, I like to say, number one, here's my answer. Number two, here's my answer. Number three, here's my answer, and submit all of that. And then it'll come back. And again, it'll say something and maybe that's useful and maybe it's partially useful. And then, sometimes the way that grants are structured is that they'll have specific questions. And so I prompt the AI with specific questions. Sometimes they have specific lengths. I tell the tool how long my response needs to be. So I have 500 characters to answer this question. What would you recommend that I say? And again, I feel like I haven't mentioned this enough. The idea of editing, right, is that you have essentially given it a bunch of information, and it also has information from the World Wide Web as well. But you want to make sure that that output still aligns with who you are and what you do and where you're looking to go and what you know about the grant, because you're going to have anecdotal information about all of those things that the AI tool doesn't necessarily have. AI tools also love to make things up, and we'll talk more about that later too. But so you also want to really confirm for accuracy too. So I can't stress enough the importance of editing and reading these outputs to make sure that to you they feel right, right? Like I've always said, the best way to use AI is as a human with your human brain. So you're going to have these outputs and then you need to use your human brain to make sure that it still makes sense. This is another new favorite that I've been using a lot. And so Notebook LM is also a Google tool, but it's different, very different from Gemini. So the way that Notebook LM works is that you're gonna create notebooks of information. You upload your documents. It'll give you like a personalized guide to that content. It gives you citations of where it's pulling information from. Love that. And then you can chat with Notebook LM to get specific responses that are related to only the content you have put in there. So I love it for that. And so I mentioned at the top of this discussion that one of the things that y'all are asking about is like, how do I leverage the data from my POS and the click rates of my email newsletter and my loyalty programs and all of that stuff? I would create a Notebook LM with that content. You're going to dump in all of those spreadsheets and then see what comes out. And you can, again, you can prompt it and ask it questions and things like that. You can also, and this is the coolest thing, which may be a good result for the data dump that we just talked about, but also just like understanding your farm in general. Notebook LM, when you're creating notebooks and you've dumped in all of this content, there is a button to generate a conversation between two people based on that information. Like, wild. It's so cool. It sounds natural too. So if you have, let's say you have a new employee, right? We hire seasonal employees on the farm. So you can dump in all of your company information into a notebook on Notebook LM that is your values and your leadership team and your customers and your SOPs in terms of workflow process. You can also use Notebook LM and any of these other tools to write SOPs. AI is very good at that. So if you don't have SOPs, use it for this. Um, so you're dumping all of that content into the notebook, and then you can generate a conversation so that your new hires just have to stream a 30-minute podcast episode, which is essentially what it sounds like, to learn about the business. And so how cool is that? And I love that because different people learn in different ways, right? So some people want to read the SOP. Some people want to listen to the conversation. Some people want to ask and answer. And this tool provides all of those options. So I still love Claude, love you, but Notebook LM is quickly becoming one of my new favorites because it's so powerful, and you can make. I pulled this up to show you for reference. You can make multiple notebooks, right? So like this is a collaborative notebook between myself and a colleague that I manage. And so I dumped in her job description and our notes from her annual reviews and what her goals are and that sort of stuff into this tool so that I have a resource to go to for my one-to-ones with her on a weekly basis and can always go back to, hey, can you remind me what Michaela's biggest goal is that she really wants to accomplish? And it will tell me, and I don't have to go dig through a bunch of documents to get that information. So this is definitely one of those, like, you set it up to help you in the future, but it's very quick. I found it very quick to be able to understand you're just dumping a bunch of information in there. And so this was the one that I made, Agency 29 SOPs. So again, this is my company name. Standard operating procedures is what SOPs are. And so I just dumped in all of our SOPs to create this opportunity for people to just chat with this book to understand SOPs for the agency. I'm working on writing my first book, and I dumped in a bunch of sources of other content that I've written to kind of help me understand how I want to structure the book and the information. This is a client that we work with, and I've dumped in some notes from what is the engagement and some notes from meetings with them so that I can have this back and forth here. And can generate a podcast episode about any of these. So how cool, this will be my next one to create and listen. And when I say create, I'm literally talking about you hit a button and it makes a podcast episode. So I'll be curious to do that for this book, to hear what the AI tool, what this notebook understands about my content that can just help me ideate, right? Like, maybe it'll have some awareness that I didn't have that I can use to generate more content. So that sort of thing. So I'm loving Notebook LM. Highly recommend playing around with that. And again, it's all about it's riding the bike, right? You're starting with the training wheels, and there is no issue with just dumping a bunch of content in here and seeing what it spits back at you. I intentionally started these at like the simpler ones, Chat GPT, Claude. Notebook is a little bit more advanced, and we're going to talk again about a couple more tools as well. But they're all just about playing around with them. And you'll find that some you're like, oh, I really like how this works. Like my preference of Claude over Chat GPT, or others that may just be, oh, I use this tool for this and that tool for that. Advanced users, that's what they do. They have multiple tools that they're using for multiple things because certain AI tools are better than others at certain things. So here's another one. And I would say, don't tell Delphi that I said this, but I would say that I don't know how much this one is going to be used. There's a pretty there's a pretty hefty price point on Delphi, and so far Notebook LM has been free. Just saw I have 4 notebooks there. But Delphi it is intended to understand you as an individual. And so this is great if you're a speaker, if you're a leader of your organization, and you're constantly answering questions from your staff about the basic stuff. And you have answered this question a zillion times, right? We've all had it. With Delphi, you can use this platform to understand you so that it answers questions as if it is you. But really, you could use Notebook LM for the same thing. And it could be because I'm a Google user that this has been no cost for me thus far. Um, Delphi does have a price point to it. Don't quote me. And I always try to be general about price points in these things anyway, too, because they're constantly changing. But so last time I checked, Delphi did have a subscription cost that was pretty hefty, enough that I didn't even want to set up an account to play around with it quite that much. But I think that concept of how can we use AI tools to answer the questions that we're constantly asking, to serve as a tool for your team to be able to understand certain information, certain questions that you're answering a million times. Delphi works for that. Notebook LM would also work for that. So another one and this is one that I do use on a semi-regular basis, is Perplexity. And so this is, if you think of Perplexity as I want to understand people kind of platform, that people that would have a fair amount of content online. So conversational search engine, it's using an LLM to answer queries, and it does cite content too, which is great. So you can see these little citations down here, is that when you click on them, it will tell you where it got that information, which is cool. Because again, as I mentioned, AI tools sometimes make up information. So, what I have used Perplexity for in the past is, like I said, understanding people. And so it may be that you have an opportunity to collaborate with a new strategic partner. And let's say the guy's name is John Smith. And so you can type in, who is John Smith of Fargo, North Dakota. I should use a North Carolina reference. But, of my nearby city, and it will give you information about that person. And so hopefully your John Smith actually has a more unique name so that there's no cross-referencing of content. There's probably more than one John Smith, in a particular area, because that's the most common name. However, it's great for that. I also use it like if I did a panel discussion last week with 4 people that I didn't know. And so I used Perplexity to generate a high level summary of each of those individuals so that I could understand their research and their background a bit. Now that's not applicable to, your everyday farmer, but, especially like for strategic partnerships and that sort of thing, I love Perplexity for that. So I had mentioned AI images. Adobe Firefly is the tool that I use when I need to create an image that I might use in the real world. Firefly is so confident that its generative AI will not breach copyright, that if you had a copyright issue, it will cover your legal bills. That is wild, because again, this is an issue with all of the other tools because of the nature of a large language model, right? It's pulling reference from the web to create an output that it's giving to you. And so some of those images that it's pulling reference from are going to be copyrighted. That's just how it works. So Firefly is great for that. This is a paid tool. If you have Adobe Creative Suite, it's included, I believe, in that. Otherwise, it would be a cost. But here's how this one works: is that, I typed in, just as a reference, make me a bee farmer working in the field transporting bee boxes. And so here are the outputs that it gave. Here's another point that I want to make about any AI output in terms of where it is with image generation right now. And again, this is changing so rapidly, but there is a certain look to AI generated images, right? That this doesn't quite look like a actual photograph, right? There's a certain gleam to it that you can tell by looking at it that it's AI. Now, when AI image generation first started, the funny thing was that like chairs would have three legs, but would still be sitting up, or, tables would have five legs, or like a human would have six fingers on one hand. It's gotten a lot better at the basics like that, but it still has a certain gleam to it. And so, where I want you to be cautious there from a brand perspective is farming is about authenticity, connection to the earth, um, you know, uh, from the ground kind of mentality, right? And you're especially if you're doing agritourism, you're offering a certain kind of authentic experience that you're encouraging people to come and enjoy. So when you're using AI images to convey the authentic experience that they're supposed to get on the farm, something on that like just doesn't compute, right? Does not line up. So I would strongly not recommend that to use AI images to market your farm in the sense that you're trying to use AI to convey the actual experience on the farm. I would strongly recommend that you use actual photography from a photography partner who's going to come and capture the actual experience. But you can use AI tools to visually show like what you like or don't like, right? So, like, let's say that you're a bee farmer, and you could even do this for any aspect of your farm, right? But you could use these images as reference for your photography partner, right? To say, what I love about this one and this one is that it's showing that warm light in the background and it feels like a really warm photo. And I like that he's in his full bee suit and you can see him working with the bee boxes and you can see inside the bee boxes. Maybe that's something, or I want a mix of like this kind of thing where it's from outside and it's this kind of thing, like from outside the bee boxes, and this some images where it's showing inside the bee boxes. But on this image, I don't like that the bee boxes look weird in the background. So you can use these AI tools as reference for your actual shoots, but be very cautious about using these just in your general marketing to market the farm experience because AI imagery is so incongruent with the actual on-farm experience that from a brand perspective, you should beware. So I wanted to summarize all of these for you. So ChatGPT and Claude, super interchangeable for a lot of reasons. Both of those tools are great for creating content for social media. These are actual ways that you can use it in your farm operation. Better understanding of your audience. So again, you could dump in a bunch of information about from your POS, your email newsletter, loyalty programs, and so on to get a better understanding of your audience. Again, I think you could use ChatGPT and Claude for that, or you could use Notebook LM to kind of create a running notebook of that information, evaluating new products and services, so on and so forth. I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer to this idea of dumping all of this information in and getting insights from it. It depends on how you're collecting your information with your POS tools, your email newsletter, and so on, because in many cases, the information that you're collecting is not necessarily specific to the individual, right? So for email newsletter, for example, what are you going to collect? You're going to have certainly that person's email address. Maybe you have also their name, but that's probably it in your email tool. So we've got two pieces of information in your email tool. Your POS is going to have an amount of information as well, right? So that's going to have purchase data that's maybe linked to a payment tool, a service, right? So like I use this credit card when I come, and so you're tracking my credit card purchases in your POS, and so you know that Mr. John Smith has come to the farm every year. He tends to come 3 times. He's come for the last 5 years. He loves it here. Like John Smith is our bestie and our favorite customer. But if you're not collecting the email address for John Smith, then your email tool does not know that that's the same person as your POS. So, and same with loyalty programs, right? You want to understand that John Smith is referring Susie Johnson to come to the farm every year. But if you don't have those tools set up to collect the right kind of information, then the AI tools are only going to be able to give you a certain type of information, right? And so you want to kind of keep that in mind. And again, you're using these AI tools to help you compute, to help you understand. So perhaps you can dump in your POS data and you can say, hey, Claude, I'm going to give you the point of sale data from my farm for the last 3 years. And I would like to know what kind of insights you can infer from this data that would help me better understand my customer, right? So ask the tool to help you do what you're looking to do. You don't have to go in necessarily with the answer. Like we were talking about the grant example, right? Where like you kind of know what you're going to need that output to be and you can set that up in advance to say I'm going to give you the information about the grant. I would like you to ask me questions to understand the farm so that I can submit this application and be a good candidate for consideration, right? That's you've got the whole big picture in mind. But you don't necessarily have to. So you can use these tools to say, can you, take this information and help me get the most out of it? What I would like to understand from my POS data is, what is the profile? What can I understand about my best customers based on this POS data? I also have email data and I can give you that. And can you help me understand how I can get these to talk to each other? So if you start getting to a place where you collect email address with your POS customers, that maybe when at that point of sale, you're giving them the option to, like, maybe you're using electronic ticketing and they have to put their email address in order to get their electronic ticket. Now you've got an email address that is going to talk to the email address in your email newsletter information, right? So now these platforms are talking to each other and you can understand how that person who bought a ticket over here, how they are engaging with your newsletter content on an ongoing basis. So that sort of thing. So you can start, right? How can we put training wheels on the bike in this kind of idea? And maybe it's you're starting to dump this content in, asking the tool what kind of understanding it can help give you, and then can also asking, what could I do to help, make these platforms talk to each other a little bit more in terms of how can I understand the customer that is buying tickets from me and the customer that's opening my emails? What is the best piece of information to make those both the same? And in that case, it's email address, right? But it may be that the easier thing for you based on your farm and how you're doing POS, because maybe you're not doing electronic ticketing yet. Maybe you're just, you have a cut flower business and people are purchasing, but it doesn't really make sense to capture email address during the POS purchase. Like it's too much, but you're capturing phone number. Okay, so then would it make more sense for you to prompt your email newsletter customers to give you their phone number so that you can have that piece of information be congruent? So it doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing across the board. It can vary based on what works best for your farm, but the idea of same type of content, different platforms so that my content can talk to each other is best case scenario. You can sometimes also transcend that content into social media platforms as well. Email address is usually the best piece of information to transcend into social media platforms that you can sometimes, when you have that understanding of email address from your customer, you can also sometimes like run ads to lookalike audiences that match, a certain set of email addresses. But you have to have a lot of email addresses in order for that to work, like 500 plus. And you also have to remember that email addresses are not going to necessarily be the same. No joke. I have 10 email addresses for my various hats that I wear. And so for me, my business email is not on all of my social media platforms, and different social media platforms, I use different email addresses to log in. So just keep some of that in mind. But the idea of how can I use AI tools to help me be better in my business? Sometimes you can ask the AI tool that direct question and tell it what information you have and ask it to ask you information about your farm so that it can understand you. And then this Q&A that you're creating can give you customized content about how best to specifically leverage that AI tool. So that's the summary of AI tools across the board. Now let's talk about training and some of the best ways to get out the best output of information. And so one is, we've talked about this a little bit throughout today's discussion, but it's the idea of prompt engineering. And so that's the process of how you give the AI tool instructions. And so according to Google, this is direct output from that. I did edit it and read it as a human to make sure that it was that it made sense. But the recommendations are set clear goals and objectives, and so that runs the gamut, like we've talked about, right? The idea of it can be the grant scenario where I know A to Z what I'm looking for. And then once you get to the end of that too, remember it's still a back and forth. You can still prompt and say, I don't like this answer and here's why. And, can you reframe it with this being more of a priority? It is still a back and forth in that regard, even when you understand what the final use case needs to be. But it can also be more broad, more general, like the example that we talked about in terms of leveraging the information, where you can say, my goal and objective is to get this kind of information and insights out of this data. Can you help me do that? Right. And so we've also talked about putting context in and background information in too, to help it understand who you are. One of the other things to keep in mind too, that may be like a common misconception is, we talked about like different prompts in the tool. Prompts, like the tool itself. So like I said, I use Claude, but in a chat conversation, it is only remembering and drawing from that information in that chat, right? If I start a new chat, it's drawing only from that information, generally. Now, I say that because these are large language models. Again, it's pulling from all of the information it can get its hands on. And so that back and forth can still ladder up to the LLM to, give information for the future. So you never want to give, you never want to say, hi, my name is Maureen Ballatori. Here's my social security number and my date of birth and et cetera, et cetera. In there, you still want to, from a privacy and cybersecurity standpoint, you still want to, be a little cautious. But just keep in mind that these prompts that you're doing, you can start a new chat and it's essentially like you've wiped its mind, generally. You want to be as specific as possible too about what you're looking for. So one of the things that I often find is that the AI tools, they love words. They love to be verbose. And I don't like to be verbose. I want you to help me like deduce the information and be brief and be clear. And so brief may mean one thing to me that is different from Claude, right? So sometimes I will say, here is this background information. Here is what I'm looking for. Can you give me a response that is between 100 and 150 words that answers this, that gives me this understanding? So the more specific you can be about what you're looking for, the better. Iterate and experiment. You are riding a bike. This is a tool that you are understanding. And so, I think point made on that. We've talked about that. So some of my favorite tricks. I use this prompt probably in 50-60% of my prompts when I'm using one of these tools. Ask me questions to understand XYZ. And so I love that because it can be used in so many different ways. I have used it to build like an outline of a discussion with a colleague that I needed to have a difficult discussion with. And so you're so vulnerable with with these AI tools. You can be, where I went to the chat prompt and I said, I need to have a difficult discussion with a colleague of mine. Here's what's been going on. Can you ask me questions to understand this situation better, to then help me build an outline for this discussion, that I want to be able to have in 30 minutes? And then it'll prompt me. It's usually around 10 questions. It'll prompt me the questions. I go through and answer them. Sometimes it will then say, I have more questions, and it will prompt me more questions, which I love. Um, and then it will give me what I want. And if that outline doesn't feel right, right? Like if I feel like it's missing some major point that I forgot to mention or didn't come up in the questions, I can say, I can add that context and then ask for a new output. So I love this Ask Me Questions tool, not only for like summarizing your business. It may be like you're writing an about page on your website and you can use Chat GPT or Claude or whatever for that. Because again, you can dump in the information. You can say, this is the output that I'm looking for. I want to create an about page for my website, and then use your human brain to edit and make sure that it is accurate and still feels right, and so on and so forth. A new one that recently came on my radar that a friend shared with me is the second one here. Please review this article. So it may be a draft, something that you've drafted. You've drafted a blog post, or you've drafted a letter of support for, I don't know, some project that you're working on, whatever it is. You have some content that you've written, or you have some content that is an output of something that it gave you in a previous chat. Could be too. Like I like to do that where, I might use this AI tool to create information, and then I might use this AI tool to analyze that information. It's kind of a weird thing. But again, it's one of those things that as you continue using these tools, you'll find that this one's really good at that and this one's really good at this other thing. So review this article from the perspective of various audiences. So audience one, audience two, audience three. So here's the example that someone gave. Review this article from the perspective of a subject matter expert. So that's one audience. One of my general LinkedIn connections, second one, and a skeptic who has a strong personal dislike of me as that third audience. So what I love about this is that, and you can also put in like, and write this as if I was, in the voice of Matthew McConaughey. Uh, and so I hope it wouldn't start with all right, all right, all right, but you never know. So again, back and forth with this kind of idea, but you can use these prompts of the various audiences that you're trying to reach. And I love that last one, a skeptic who has a strong personal dislike of me, because what's it going to do with that information? It's going to take into the idea of, well, I need to explain, and, I want to be clear for this person, this audience, that sort of thing. So that's an interesting one. Another great best practice is sectioning chats for future use, and naming them accordingly. So we just looked at my Notebook LM2. I intentionally have those named very clearly, so that I can go back to them in the future. I'm really bad about doing this in Claude, but there have definitely been times where I'm like digging through the my prompts to find something that I've prompted before. And then when I do that, I really try to like rename the name of that chat thread so that I can go back to it in the future and more easily find it. And then this other idea too, favorite trick, like give feedback. Remember that this is a back and forth conversation, and the output is not the final result. Doesn't have to be the final result, right? So if there's something you don't like about it, it's too long, it's unclear, it's too fluffy, it sounds too formal, it sounds like a chatbot, like write this to sound more like a human. All of those things, your stream of consciousness thoughts can all go in there in terms of, what you think and feel about the content that just came back to you, and ask for adjustments. This image was created with Adobe Firefly to make my point that AI tools are like a golden retriever. They just want to make you happy. And so this is just emphasizing that point that AI tools will sometimes make up content, right? It's coming from a large language model. So if there's content out there that was written in satire or was hypothetical, it may not know that, right? And so the many of the tools these days, when you start using them, they remind you that not all information may be accurate. But this is why I emphasize so much the importance of editing and reviewing this content like a human being, as a human being, because sometimes like totally made up information can go in there, which is wild. I've seen it happen a lot. So make sure that you're reviewing your content for accuracy. I mentioned this earlier, this idea of authenticity, and I just want to make this point yet again about this idea of human still required. You do want to use AI to make your farm data smarter. So the examples that we were talking about in terms of dumping in your data from your POS and asking the tool to help you analyze it and understand how you can best leverage it and understand what sort of insights may be useful to the business. All of these things are great. But you should not take data straight out of the AI tools and blindly apply it to your business and your marketing, right? So, like the AI tool may say, you should add a super slide at your agritourism business. And here's why businesses like yours in other regions, have a super slide. And so you should add one. You don't want to necessarily just go out and buy a super slide because there may be other components that it is not considering or aware of that make a super slide applicable to these other agritourism businesses that are not applicable for you. Maybe they're a larger near a large city, and so they have more customers, more visitors than you do to your farm, and so it doesn't make sense for you. Or maybe you don't have the space for it or something like that, right? So human required. Okay. Use your brain. Don't trust everything an AI tool gives you. This is the golden retriever example. You want to make sure that the information is still accurate. Here's something that you also want to not do. This is a Dolly generated image of AI on the farm. So I think there's water in here. This isn't even like where is this tractor? What are these drones? This wind like this one's long and this one's short and it's just not accurate, right? So keep all of these things in mind as you're generating images. I made the point already about authenticity for farms and that sort of thing and how important that is. I was at an ag conference all week last week, and I can't tell you how many images very similar to this that I saw in presentations across the board. So it's one thing if you're trying to use an image like this to, kind of explain information and just get people to grasp a concept. I think most people know that AI farming doesn't actually look like this, but be very cautious when it comes to sharing AI generated images on your social media for the reasons that we already discussed in terms of authenticity. Authentic image creation, authentic content creation as well, especially as it relates to images, is also a point I like to make. This is a stock photo that, so this is not AI generated. This is an actual guy, but, his shirt is very white. His beard is very trimmed. It looks like that's a brand new hat, right? So that's not authentic of what the actual farm experience looks like. In contrast, this is the vineyard manager at one of our clients, Fox Run Vineyards. There's an authenticity to it, right? His pants are dirty, the tractor's dirty. You can see the farm in the background. All of these things, right? The hat looks like he's worn it a million times. So you are going to better align with your customer. They are going to have a better understanding of your on-farm experience and, what goes into it when you're using authentic content creation. The other idea of that too is if the image is just an output, like we have no idea what's the difference between this stack of tomatoes and this stack of tomatoes if you're not telling the story. Like let's say, this was grown by this guy, grown by this guy, right? Whereas this is regenerative and it was farmed by Farmer John's fifth generation daughter, those things come through in the story, and you should be telling the story in your marketing to ladder back to the farm. And that's how you create authentic connections with your audience. So make sure that storytelling is there, and you can certainly use AI to help tell that story, but make sure that that's happening. So you've got AI tools. Now what? Remember that AI is a tool in your toolbox for your business and your marketing, but it is not the all-in, all-final solution. Consider dropping your farm data into Notebook, LM, or Claude to see what suggestions it may have for you as that output. Be careful what you reveal to AI. Like I said, you're not putting your social security number in there. The best marketing practices for any business are tied to the goals that you want to achieve. And so you want to set your plan, implement that, analyze, and repeat. AI tools can help you do those things, but the best marketing is tied to something that is connected to your goals. And so if a super slide doesn't make sense, then you shouldn't be pushing for a super slide, right? That kind of idea. I want to thank Visit NC Farms for bringing me in to deliver this content to you. I hope that it was helpful. I hope that it was useful. I hope that it makes AI tools more approachable for you and something that you start using to continue to build the business. Thank you so much.